All right, welcome into Mississippi State Live on the Voice of College Football. Andrew Miller here on a Monday evening, about 9 minutes late than I was supposed to be. I didn't get set up in time, and I needed to put down some notes real quick before getting into the stuff we're going to talk about tonight. See if a few more people can get into here before we get rolling. A lot of news over the past couple days, a lot more than I think any of us were really expecting to be talking about at this point. I think the plan for the weekend was to get on the show and discuss, all right, what are the moves Mississippi State needs to be making in the transfer portal. You had signing day come to an end, so you have that part of your class put into place, and it's kind of like, okay, what's the next step for Mississippi State? Well, it's going to be, what are you targeting in the portal? And the portal doesn't open for almost another month, but obviously you're already seeing kids declare that they're on their way out. State's had a few other guys enter, well, not enter, but announce their intentions to leave. None really of note. But that was the plan. We thought we were going to be discussing, all right, what does State have to go over to the portal? What are some of the names you could maybe target? Because, hey, we're able to speculate here. We don't have any restrictions on saying go after this guy, go after this guy. But no, we had a lot of news happen over the weekend, and obviously did the emergency show Saturday morning talking about the Zach Arnett hire, which was not made official at that point, but everybody was saying it was going to happen. I mean, I can give some final quick thought on that, but obviously we have more coaching news with the news about Chad Bumphis, so we're going to talk about that. But Mississippi State going to a bowl game, going to the Mayo Bowl, which that's kind of the big story, and that became what was going to be the primary thing to talk about in this episode today until the coaching staff news, which is what I'm going to hit first. But yeah, Mississippi State off to the Mayo Bowl, second time that you've got an APR Bowl for Mississippi State, so we'll talk about that game just a little bit, what it could mean for the Bulldogs. For those of you who are joining in, if you could leave us a like on the video, subscribe if you are not already, and turn that notification bell on so you do know when we do go live. And certainly if you could share the stream, tell people about us, we would greatly appreciate that. So the big news coming out of the weekend was the start of Mississippi State's changes to the coaching staff, and that was the official hiring of Zach Arnett back as Mississippi State's defensive coordinator. Obviously, I did the reaction show to that, had more of my in-depth thoughts on that move. But look, kind of putting a bow on that decision and State making that hire. Look, I mean, I think there's three big reasons why it makes a lot of sense, right? Number one, you needed someone who was proven to step in and be successful here. You needed to make a proven hire. You needed a proven DC after what you had in Coleman Hutzler, having a coach who had not done the job before and had done it poorly, who is someone who has shown they can do it. And it's almost harder to get someone more proven than Zach Arnett in the sense that we're talking about Mississippi State. And I know that's not always the proper way to judge it, but the guy quite literally was here just a couple years ago and was very successful as a defensive coordinator. So that's, checks box number one. He has done the job, not only in the SEC, but he has done it here at Mississippi State. Box number two, experience with working with autonomy over the defense. Obviously with Mike Leach, the defense sort of just got to operate separate in a lot of ways. And Arnett had full reign over running that unit. It's going to be kind of similar with Levy. Not quite the same extreme to the way it was with Leach, but the defense gets to operate and schematic decisions, any of those sort of things. I don't think Levy's tampering with what they're doing defensively. So Arnett has shown he can handle that. And then the third thing, I do think his style complements what Levy wants to do. It's an attacking, aggressive style of defense, as we've seen. Obviously, they're going to be very aggressive, and sometimes that means they're going to get burnt for big plays over the top downfield, but they're going to come after you. They're going to load up and try to take away the run game, and they're going to force you to beat them one-on-one down the field because we're going to send pressure, we're going to change angles, we're going to disguise things. Very attacking style of defense, which I think complements an offense that in theory is supposed to be quick strike, explosive when you talk about what Levy does with the Briles system, veer and shoot, whatever you want to call it. The last couple of years you've been much more conservative defensively, and I think a lot of that was personnel-based. I don't know that Coleman Hutzler was wanting to sit back and play a lot of rush street drop eight because he felt that's what State that's just the style of defense he wanted to run. I think he looked at the players they had and said, look, we don't have the guys to get pressure up front. We don't have the guys to play coverage on the back end. So we don't trust the ability to just load up the box and try to sell it to stop the run or try to send a bunch of pressure because we're going to get beat deep. But we also don't have the bodies to play just normal coverage on the back end. We're just going to play rush 3, drop 8. We're going to hope that our we're going to get run on, but we're going to hope that our linebackers and safeties can make tackles, and we're going to try to force defenses to have to go on these offenses to have to go on these long drives, and we're going to hope that they can't execute continuously and that we can make some stops in the red zone. Well, as we saw with State's defense over the last couple of years, they couldn't make the tackles, and when it was the idea of making a play in space. And it didn't matter that the offenses had to run a lot of plays to get in the end zone. They just were very effective running those plays. I think Arnett's style, you're going to have more talent for sure. But in the same sense, though, there is a level of the way the confusion they can create can give you a little bit of an edge also. And I think that can help out State quite a bit. And again, playing a style where we're saying, look, we're going to play aggressive because we know our offense plays fast. That means our defense has to be on the field more. That's a big part of when you play with a tempo offense, it's going to impact your defense. You're going to have to run more plays. You're going to be on the field more. That's a part of it. So rather than force our guys to have to run even more plays, which with the bend don't break approach is what you were doing, let's try to make these defensive possessions go as quickly as possible. We're either forcing a turnover, negative play, or getting the ball back to our offense, or we're giving up some explosive plays down the field and the other offense is going to strike quick. But either way, we're getting the ball back to our offense. We're an offensive team. We're getting the ball back to that side of the ball. I think it complements it well. And look, if you get the Arnett you got just a few seasons ago, I think this will work really well opposite of what Levy wants to do on offense. Now, look, the holdup is the recruiting side of it. Obviously, during Arnett's tenure, recruiting and development was not a strong suit. You did not sign a lot of high-level players out of the high school ranks. And even the guys you did sign that were deemed to be SEC caliber players, because you signed a lot of guys that were not SEC caliber players and guys who frankly shouldn't have been on the field or shouldn't have ever been recruited. Even the guys you signed that looked to be good gets, a lot of them didn't pan out. And you still have a few of them here. Isaac Smith is about the only one that's really lived up to the expectations as a recruit. Some of those other 4-star guys you got are either out of the program or if they're here, just okay players. And I'm not trying to knock on the kids. It's just the reality of the situation is they didn't get developed and coached up the way you needed them to be. And some of the recruiting for Arnett does have an impact on why you're at the position you're at defensively now. Now, does the previous coaching staff and the way some of Leach handled some things with some of his staffers, did that have an impact? It's possible. But look, in Arnett's 1 year as a head coach, it's not like they were doing a good job targeting defensive talent either. That was his staff. That was his decision-making. And, they weren't able to go out and get good defenders in that class in 2023. So going into the 2024 class. So that's the part of the job that's going to have to improve. But if he can do a better job of that this time around, if they can get surrounded with some staffers who are actually going to help out as recruiters, because I do think some of the guys he hired, in the recruiting mold, clearly the game has kind of passed them by. And thinking of one in particular in David Turner. We'll see. If you can get some better players in, I think this move can work out really well. But that's going to be the kind of thing that makes or breaks it. I understand why some people are upset about the hire. Believe me, I'm not a Zach Arnett fan. For those of you who followed me long enough, you know where I stand on things. But I'm setting aside that to just look at it from a standpoint of, do I think the guy can make Mississippi State's defense better? Yes, I think he can make State's defense better. Let's hope it works out. The news of the day, though, is on the offensive side of the ball with a staffing change that I don't believe anybody saw coming. And that is that wide receivers coach, Chad Bumphis, is no longer going to be with the program moving forward. I think rumors started coming out, I think, early afternoon or maybe around lunchtime. Started to see some people suggest a few things and then get the reporting from the Jeans Page guys. They put out the report officially that Chad Bumphis' tenure as Mississippi State's wide receivers coach is coming to an end. Don't know if he's going to coach the bowl game, how that's going to work out, but his run is over after 3 seasons in Starkville. Obviously, former Bulldog receiver, played under Dan Mullen, was a key piece in turning around the program under Mullen. Signed with Mullen as a freshman, as a 4-star out of Tupelo. Has an outstanding career. Ended his career as this program's all-time leading receiver, which he's second in that now. Still the leader in all-time receiving touchdowns. An all-time great Bulldog, a guy that was a fan favorite, and a guy that loves Mississippi State and was having success working up the coaching ranks as a wide receiver coach. Had the opportunity to bring him in 2022, and Mike Leach chose to go another direction. But then in 2023, Arnett goes and brings him in as receivers coach. Levy ultimately retains him for the past couple of seasons, and we're getting was a defensive quality. Oh, hold on, who was the defensive quality control coach at Oak State? Was that Bumphis? I don't think we got him from Utah, if I remember correctly. But regardless, God, Oliver, you messing with me there. I was getting into it, but anyway, you had the opportunity to bring him in. You chose not to. Comes on at 23. Levy keeps him on staff, and look, it felt like it made a lot of sense, right? It's a guy who is a Bulldog, who is from the state of Mississippi, who's going to be able to recruit well in the state, going to be able to get some of the wide receiver talent that State's not been able to get previously and get them to come to Starkville. It was a move that felt like it made a whole lot of sense. And through 2 seasons, State's receivers were the strengths of the team. That 2024 offense, I've talked about a lot, that offense only did anything because of the receivers. And yeah, Kevin Coleman was a big part of that, but Craver was very good when he was engaged and available. Kelly Akari, I think as the season went along, got better and better. I thought Jordan Mosley made some plays that season. And when State's receivers were kind of what made the offense tick. And then this year, you lose pretty much all of those guys. And you have Brennan Thompson and Anthony Evans thrive. And you still have the receivers be the strength of what you're doing offensively. I thought the incoming recruiting class for receivers was strong. So it was, nobody saw this coming, right? Nobody thought this was the move that was going to happen. And obviously people are pretty upset about that for some obvious reasons. If there was an offensive staffer that was going to go, you didn't think it was going to be Bump. There was talk that, Holisek, the quarterback coach, may no longer be with the program. It could be may have an opportunity to go be a G5 OC somewhere, but his name had come up as someone that might move on. Anthony Tucker was talked about as an option for Auburn, that he may go join Alex Golish's staff as a running backs coach there. Nobody thought Lode Holt would be fired, but again, with how the O-line performed, is it possible that Levy would make another move at O-line coach? Like, if you were going to do it just based off which unit was struggling on offense, you could see that move happening. John Cooper at tight ends, that's Levy's guy, but the tight end position's kind of been underwhelming through a couple of years. So the position that's been the strongest has been receiver. And because of that, nobody anticipated that would be the position that you'd be making a change. But here we are. And I've been wondering, like, why was this the case? Like, why would they make this move? And like the first thing that kind of came to my head was, okay, well, is it possible he's making this decision because he wants to get one of his guys in there? That, hey, I run a very specific system. We have a very specific style of receiver we're looking for. We have specific ways that we're teaching them from a technique standpoint and the style of routes that they're running. Do I need to have one of my guys in there? And, I put that out on social media, which it's kind of funny. Bumphis liked that tweet. So I don't know if that was him saying, you don't know what you're talking about, or just kind of a whatever, but hey, it is what it is. But then I went and looked at the guys Levy has worked with as receivers coaches. And when he was at UCF, it was not a guy who had ties to that system. When he was at Oklahoma, not guys who had ties to that system. Even when Ole Miss, Derek Nix was the receivers coach there, and he had been on staff in Oxford for several years as a running backs coach at that point. Derek Nix had never been in that system and, was coaching the position fine. So clearly it's not a case of he thinks he has to have a guy who has been in his system or has done it. Like, he clearly is just looking for whoever he thinks is best suited for that role. Which typically means if you're not going after someone who knows your system or your style of coaching, that typically means you're getting someone who, okay, from a recruiting standpoint, are they going to be able to get the talent? And that's kind of the question with Bump. And I have thought of him as a good recruiter. I think a lot of fans have, because State's gone out and gotten some good players. And there's been some misses along the way, but I do wonder, should we put a lot of those misses on him? You know, is it J.J. Harrell not panning out? Is that a Bumphis misevaluation? Stonka in that whole situation where he clearly wants to be a receiver. State thinks he probably is best suited as a safety, but they recruited him as a receiver. Like, is that a miss from State? You haven't seen any of the other high school recruits pan out. The transfers that have come in and been really successful are guys who have mostly been tied to Levy. I don't really know with Kevin Coleman, was the lead recruiter there, but I know with Ant and Brennan, those are Levy guys. So is the case of the recruits you've had that have been successful are guys who are mostly tied to Levy, and Bumphis's guys haven't panned out. I don't know, and I'm not saying one way or another because I don't know for sure. Now, that was the thing that's been presented, and somebody put the post on one of the boards, and it was I guess the idea was if you look at the receivers Levy has gotten us, and I don't know if this is actually the truth, but he talks about Kevin Coleman, Brendan Thompson, Anthony Evans, Aiden Williams, Grayson Harris, and those are Harris we haven't seen anything from, but it's like those guys have been the more successful players, whereas all these other receivers are bump recruits and didn't work out. I have no idea if that's legit or not. I have no idea what the percentage of Levy recruiting a guy versus bump recruiting a guy was. But if you want to make an argument that to this point, State's only had a couple receivers truly break out and that they're guys that were mostly tied to Levy, you can probably make that point. I do think State's going to have to go in the portal for receiver again this year because you look at the guys they have on the roster and you don't know, do they have the guys ready to step in and really contribute? Because yes, you're getting Anthony Evans back, but after that, Aiden Williams, who is also, that one's kind of Levy. Is Aiden Williams ready to be a true go-to player for you? Where's Frisco McGee at this point? Where's Ricky Johnson at this point in his career? So I do understand the perspective a little bit of, while State's had some really big hits at receiver, and that's not the position that's been a struggle for you, you possibly could be doing better. It's not like you're just loaded with great receivers top to bottom. And, if State lost its top couple of guys, how would they perform at receiver? That'd be questionable at this point. So I could see some recruiting concerns. Now, I still think he's done a pretty good job of going out and getting players overall, but I can see it a little bit. And let's be honest, if we removed some of the outside factors that are kind of clouding the vision, people would not be as upset about the move. People are mad for two big reasons. Number one is he is a Bulldog. He is one of our guys. He was a beloved player, was a great player here, and a guy that champions for Mississippi State, a guy that was so ecstatic to be able to come back and coach at his alma mater, and a guy that, I think we would all love to one day see be in an even bigger role at Mississippi State. And he is one of those guys. And this is not a Mississippi State thing. This is college football fans. You love having guys like that be a part of your program. It's good to have guys like that be a part of your program. And you never want to see those guys get shown the door. So, that's a big part of it. The other part is, of all, I kind of alluded to this earlier, of all the positions where you were expecting a change, this was not one of them. Because there's other coaches people are ready to see be gone. People want Corey Bell gone as corners coach. People want David Turner gone as defensive line coach. Some people want Lode Holt gone. Now, again, that one's not going to happen. But if there was a spot on offense, why did Mississippi State's offense suck this year? Primarily because the offensive line was bad. That was more than anything. Because if State's offensive line was fine, we don't have some of the same concerns with Shapen that we did. The O-line was terrible. Now, do I think it's all on Lode Holt? No. But if you're going to fire someone purely off the performance of their unit, Lode Holt would be the guy and not Bumphis when you talk about the offense. But there's all these defensive staff changes that people have been wanting to see that are not happening. It's well, why is this getting out that we're moving on from Bumphis, but the other guys, we've not heard anything there. And with Corey Bell, there's not been any sort of answer on what's happening there. David Turner, it's been pretty heavily alluded to, he's not going to be a part of the program next year, or if he is, it's an off-field role. Nothing official. That's just what everybody has been suggesting. But it's still one of those things, people are wanting to see coaching changes. This was not one anybody was expecting. So that adds into it as well. If you removed those factors, no, people are not as upset. And even if you just got rid of the fact that, like, hey, if this guy did not have Mississippi State ties, people are not nearly as frustrated with it. It would be kind of similar to last year getting rid of Cody Kennedy as O-line coach. Now, that's a little different because the O-line last year was not good, so you kind of understood the move more. But when people were upset with the move of Cody Kennedy last year, it wasn't really because they thought Cody Kennedy was a good coach. It was because they're like, you're getting rid of this guy on the offensive line, but the defense is crap. Like, why are you keeping all these? Why are you not getting rid of Coleman Hutzler? Why are you not getting rid of Corey Bell, David Turner, all these coaches that we don't think should be here? So those are like the big factors that lead into why it's a frustration. And the other part of it is, let's be honest, like, I'm just going to be completely honest here, and I'll get into more of this here, but I don't think getting rid of Chad Bumphis is going to change Mississippi State's offense all that much. Like, I think you could have kept Mississippi State's offense, even if you want to tell me we could have been doing better at receiver. And look, I am definitely of the opinion that having the big-time receivers is a huge, huge thing for an offense. But even if you told me, hey, State could be better at receiver and they weren't doing enough under Bumphis, is getting a couple more receivers in what's going to be the difference in this offense actually getting all that much better? Or coaching them up a little bit better going to be the big difference? I think the big difference would come with fixing the O-line. Quarterback. Fixing that and getting better quarterback play, which, hey, that goes back on Lee and Holisek. I don't know if the receiver position is what was causing any sort of problems. Like, you can tell me you weren't getting what you needed to in the recruiting trail, but at the end of the day, you were still getting production in that room. So why not have a guy on staff who plays the role that Bumphis does? That's where it's a big questionable. Because, like, there is value to having a guy like Bumphis on staff. And I put this out initially, like, you do need to first set aside the fact that when you're evaluating this decision, you do need to set aside the fact that he is a former Bulldog. Because, as I mentioned, that stuff does get overblown by fans. It's valuable, but if the job is not being done well, that doesn't matter. Like, to view Ole Miss, Matt Luke being a guy who would die for Ole Miss does not mean Matt Luke needs to be Ole Miss's football coach, right? And fans naturally just kind of want alums to be a part of the program. I've seen State fans have been listing off a lot of former Bulldogs who are coaching assistants now across college football. And I'm not saying I wouldn't bring any of those guys in, but I am like, I'm not going to bring those guys in over a guy who could do a better job, who is showing they are doing a better job. Like, make sure you're getting someone in who actually is doing the job well. Don't just hire someone because, well, they're an alum and they love Mississippi State. That said, there is value to having that. Like, having the guy on staff who has the connections across the state, who can tell guys about what it means to represent this program, who can relate to players about, like, going through it and being a part of Mississippi State football and making sure they fully understand it. Like, there's value there. You could make a case it's even more valuable now in an era where half these kids are not going to a school with the intention of, like, I'm there because I want to be a part of this program. They're going to a place for a paycheck. But it's the case for Mississippi State guys too. State has NIL. State's paying for players to come here. So you have to make sure those guys get it and understand what they're representing. Chad Bumphis, I think more than anybody else on that staff, is going to make sure they get it. Now, do I think the offensive staff, do I suddenly think that means they're going to have a hard time getting players without Bumphis? No. Like, you're going to be able to recruit offense as long as Levy is here. Like, you're going to get solid quarterbacks. You're definitely going to get solid receivers. I think even without Bumphis, you will get receivers. You'll probably get some good running backs. O-line is the question right now. You got to get O-line figured out. Defense is where you got the harder sell right now. So if you wanted to say you wanted to have the former player guys on the defense, maybe you could make a case there. But regardless, like, there's value to having a guy like that on the staff. And as I mentioned earlier, Levy has had the recruiter program guy be a part of his staff as a receivers coach previously at other stops. So despite what I was thinking might be a logical explanation, it has nothing to do with whether or not the guy knows the offense. Like that, he just wants someone in there who can get the players. I guess he clearly does not think Bumphis is getting the players to the level he needs. I don't know. It's a questionable move for sure. And like, this is going to be a risk, you know, because if this doesn't work, it's going to be really bad for Levy. We understand he's going into a hot seat year. Getting a Mayo Bowl invite does not change that. Winning the Mayo Bowl does not change that if they do win that. He's on a hot seat next season. He has to deliver, and probably has to deliver more than just going 6-6 and making a bowl. It probably needs to be a good season in Sarkville. I'm not saying if it's not 8-4, he's fired, but whatever record you get to, it better be something that along the way people are excited. And clearly he thinks he's going to do every possible move he can to maximize the program. And if he thinks we need to be upgrading our receiver room, okay. And that's where, I said I'm not going to challenge him. And Rufus Warren, former MSU tight end and O-lineman, was kind of going at me over that. Like, not going at me, but pointing out, like, he will definitely challenge Levy on this, which it's fair. I'm just not going to challenge him over the idea that, like, hey, I get going into this next season, he clearly thinks he needs to make this be as good as he possibly can. And if they feel they can upgrade at receiver, okay. But it's a risk, because if it doesn't work, this is one of those moves that's going to turn the fan base against you. And I am not one to do the thing of, like, you've got to do the moves that appease to the fan base. I do think that gets overblown a little bit, of like making a hire or keeping a guy on staff just because fans like him. I'm not big on that, but I also understand that is part of the game in college football. And if you're already not popular and you're already someone who's being questioned, a move like this where you're getting rid of the most popular guy on your coaching staff and a guy that the whole fan base loves, if it doesn't work and you don't nail the hire and you don't get better at receiver, people are going to be really upset. And you're going to lose support quickly. So it's a massive risk. Now, who are they going to turn to? The two names that have been coming up a lot are Derek Nix and Jacob Peeler. Nix, obviously, been in the state of Mississippi for a very long time, played at Southern Miss, coached at Southern Miss for years and years, then was at Ole Miss for a long, long time there, mostly as a running backs coach, but as I mentioned, spent a few years as a wide receivers coach there in Oxford with Ian Lane. Was at Auburn this past couple of years, working with Freeze, who obviously he worked with at Ole Miss for a long time. Big-time recruiter, gotten a lot of big-time talent within the state of Mississippi. And look, that's a guy that if you get him to Mississippi State and he can complete the trifecta of the FBS schools in Mississippi, that'd be a big-time hire of a guy who's done the job successfully before, a guy who's attracted a lot of big-time talent. The other name coming up a lot is Jacob Peeler from Missouri. This is a guy who, from Kosciuszko, is a Mississippi State grad and has a pretty impressive resume when it comes to the receivers that he's coached. You look at Missouri right now, and guys like Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, Kevin Coleman, they've had really good receivers in Missouri since he has been there. He was at Ole Miss and was coaching guys like A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf. Now, he did not sign those guys. He was not on staff when those guys were there, but he did coach them. And he got guys like Elijah Moore to Oxford, and he signed good receivers to Ole Miss when he was there. So that's another guy who knows Mississippi and has recruited at a high level and has done it now at multiple SEC stops. If you get him in, that's another guy where it's like, okay, yeah, proven on the recruiting trail, proven production at the position. That'd be a big win. I don't know who you go after beyond those two. If you don't nail this hire, people are going to be pretty upset because it's going to feel like you just let a guy go for no good reason. And, a comment here, it just doesn't seem bad enough to make this change. Like, you'd have to make a pretty big hire to justify this. Yeah. No, if this is not a hire that, if you don't bring in someone who has proven they are a very good receivers coach and has done it for a long time, it's going to leave everybody questioning, like, why on earth would you do this? Because even if you want to have an opinion that Bumphis has just not done that good of a job on the recruiting trail, that there's been too many misses, the development hasn't been there. If you want to make that case, the 2 years he's been here, and our 2023 did not go the greatest, but State's receivers on that offense were still probably the strength of that offense. But the 2 years under Levy, they've gotten the production at receiver. They've had good receivers come to the program. They've had guys produce on Saturdays. So even if you want to have the most negative view and say he's not really doing much, man, having him in the locker room is still valuable. Another comment here. Levy has proven he will give people the full benefit of the doubt before he fires and benches them. So I'm fine with letting go of Bumphead every day and can see if he's worth it. Maybe. I mean, look, I don't think Levy is moving on from Bumphis for no reason. Like, I think if Levy after 2 years with, I guess the most optimistic viewpoint you can have, which I know a lot of fans are not going to want to have this because it paints a beloved Bulldog in a negative light. And I'm not trying to make it negative about Bump. The most optimistic view you can have is if Levy, with the way State has performed at receiver and that being the strength of the offense, some of the guys they've been able to get signed and guys they've been able to bring in, if he's able to see that after 2 years and still think we need to be doing better, then there's probably something to that. But again, you're going to have to do a better job than what you're going to have to get better. You're going to have to do a whole lot of better. Here's a comment from Oliver, and this is why I was confused because I guess my comment earlier didn't post. We hired Kiwi Thompson as assistant DB's Nichols coach. He was defensive quality coach at Oklahoma State. Not sure why the full message didn't post. Do not know that name whatsoever. All right, then. I will say Arnett, I wonder if that's an Arnett hire because Arnett did always have a Nichols coach when he was at State. He liked to have somebody coach that position, which I think is, the dog safety position, which Arnett uses as like the middle of the field guy, not like a traditional nickel corner. But yeah, I don't know. Could there be another offensive hire, OC analyst on the way that affects this? I doubt it. So everybody is talking about the Kendall Briles thing. I don't think that's happening. So there was a comment made, like going back when Levy was hired, people talked about going and getting Kendall as OC. And I think some of the insiders said from what they had heard, Levy and Kendall don't really want to work together under the idea that they want to make sure they are not slowing the upward trajectory for either. They want to make sure that they can keep ascending at their own rate and to ultimately become head coaches one day. Whereas if you put them on the same staff together, if it goes poorly, then you're both kind of starting over or, whatever that may be. The other thing, if you're hiring Kendall, you would be hiring him to come in and call plays. Levy's not giving up play calling. And I think I've talked about this previously. You hired Levy because he's a play caller. I understand in this era, people feel like, the head coach has got to be the CEO. He can't be one running the offense. There's just too much on his plate. How can you manage game day? How can you manage the recruiting? How can you do all those things and make sure you're still maximizing what you can do on offense? I think it's overblown. I also think you can delegate other stuff on staff to help alleviate that. Jeff Levy got the job as Mississippi State's head coach because of what he has done as an offensive mind, as an offensive play caller. He wouldn't have gotten the job if that was the only redeeming quality he had as a candidate. Clearly, there were other things about him that people felt could step in and be a guy to lead a program. But you hired him because he's a play caller. You hired him for what he does on offense. I don't think you should give that up after 2 years, especially when, look, I've been critical of stuff with Levy this year, and I didn't love everything I saw with the offense this season. I also recognize that when your offensive line can't block, one, that makes life incredibly difficult to do much of anything. Two, like the whole, you can't even do a lot of the easy cheat answers because we talked about it a lot. The receivers couldn't block either. So you want to throw like quick passes, quick screens to try to find answers. They didn't really have a great answer for what they could do. So I think if you get O-line fixed, I think a lot of the concerns people have about Levy as a play caller would be alleviated pretty quick. I don't think you should be making that move. That's Kiwi Thompson. Used to be the coach at Madison Central, Mississippi guy, but hasn't proven much in Power 5, will be an off-field gig. Okay. So sounds like recruiter, basically what we're getting at there, coming in to help recruit. So that's an interesting move. Did not know about that one, so thanks for Oliver for bringing that up. I don't know. Here we go. Another thing on Bump. I agree 100% with your point about not keeping a guy just because he's an alum. If Corey Bell was an alum, I'd still think he should be gone. Yeah, no, that's one that's funny too. That's totally fair. We'll see how it works out. Again, I don't know if this was a move that you needed to make, but if Levy thinks this is going to make the receiver room be better, well, then we'll see how it works out. Got to nail the hire though, because if you don't nail the hire, it's going to turn really ugly really quick. Isn't more the issue most people have with Levy not being a great game manager, having someone in his ear about situation might help. That's some of it. The game management is definitely a part of it. We've seen that with some of the fourth down calls but it's what I've talked about. What's funny with that is like Levy makes play calling decisions like an OC. Like his OC brain is, we want to keep throwing. We want to keep going for fourth downs. Like that's OC brain is like, no, we're going to keep being aggressive. Whereas a head coach is the one who would rein it in. And like I've talked, like I don't know if taking away his play calling would suddenly make him not want to do it. Maybe it would. Maybe it would be the case of if I'm just on the headset and I'm not the one calling the play, suddenly I look at my guy calling the play and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like maybe. I could definitely understand though getting somebody on staff to help try to rein him in a little bit. But I don't think he needs to give up play calling. I think that's something Levy still needs to hold on to, at least for another year. See how this next year goes. And then at that point, if you're still having issues, well, look, frankly, if the play calling is bad next year for whatever reason, the offense doesn't work, Levy's probably not your coach. So see how the next year goes with it first. We'll see, though. It's an interesting move, choosing to move on from Bumphis. I mean, I don't love it. I hate that you're getting rid of a guy. Like, we'd be like, hey, I'm a fan too. So, like, yeah, I wish he was still on staff. But there's hires you could make that I think you could get better, but you got to make them. Let's talk about Mississippi State going to the postseason, because if you thought State's season was over with, it's not. For now, the second time in the program's history, you're going to a bowl game thanks to your APR scores. We get good grades here. Unlike a certain coach up at Akron who, despite being bowl eligible this year, doesn't get to take his program that has been so poor. He doesn't get to take them to a bowl game because they couldn't get their APR scores where they needed to be. Such a shame. I just thought, it's very funny to think about the fact that Joe Moorhead's team being ineligible to go to a bowl game this year as a 6-6 team helped send Mississippi State to a bowl game. That is very funny to me. And I had not thought about that until just now, talking about the APR scores. Because for those who have not kept up, Akron football, Joe had his best season there. They went 6-6. Which you go 6-6 at Akron, they don't do that. That's a good season there. But they couldn't go to a bowl game because before the season they were deemed ineligible because their academic scores were so bad. So Joe gets his best season there. He finally has what is a objectively great season for that program, and they don't get to go to a bowl. And it helps Mississippi State go to a bowl. That is fantastic. Just love how that worked out. State in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Basically, the story here, two Big 12 programs, Iowa State and Kansas State, both declined bowl invites because their coaching staffs are changing. Head coach is stepping away. Chris Kleiman retiring at K-State, and then with Iowa State, Matt Campbell taking the job at Penn State. So the overturn there has those programs deciding, it's just not a great time to go to a bowl. I believe Mississippi State was number 4 in line for the APR scores. Number 1 being Rice because, of course, nerd school, and they accept. But then number 2 was Auburn. Of the 5 and 7 teams, Auburn was second. They declined because of the coaching change and didn't feel logistically made a lot of sense. UCF was third. Their semester is already over, so players had gone home, and they've already had a lot of guys announce their intentions to hit the portal, so they were not going to basically be able to field a team. So Mississippi State was next in line. So Mississippi State will be heading off to a bowl game this year, and it'll be the Duke's Mayo Bowl out in Charlotte, which State has played in that game before. Obviously, it was the Duke's Mayo Bowl, but They were previously the Belk Bowl, Dak Prescott's final game, where he put up crazy numbers against NC State as Bulldogs put 51 points on the board, had almost like 600 yards of offense. That was in the rain too. Big day for Dak Prescott and the Bulldogs to get a ninth win. Fun send off for his career. Back in Charlotte for the first time since that game, they will take on Wake Forest, who had a really successful season. Wake Forest 8-4 in their first year under head coach Jake Dickert. First time going to a bowl game for that program since 2022, which is the same for Mississippi State. They went 4-4 in ACC play. Been really good defensively on the year, only allowing 21.5 points per game, which is one of the top in the ACC. 322 yards per game, and they hold strong in the red zone, so it's a strong defensive team. They have a defensive end who has 17 tackles for loss, so that's let's make him miss Kamario Taylor. Good running back, Damon Claiborne with 907 yards, 10 touchdowns. Not a great offense, but I mean they can run the ball decently well. And again, the defense has been really strong for them. It's a good, solid football team and a good test for Mississippi State, but State needed to accept this bowl invite. And it's funny because you see all these teams across the country saying no to this, including a lot of other teams in Mississippi State's position. And State's like the one who said, yeah, we'll do it. Let's go do it. And it makes a ton of sense. Like, getting the extra practices in, is valuable, especially when you talk about a Mississippi State program that is currently rebuilding and has to get things figured out moving forward. Going and playing another game is just going to be invaluable, and a lot of reps for a lot of players that are going to need to step up next year. Could you get some receivers to step up? Because we talked about, Brennan Thompson. I think there's talk about trying to get him another year of eligibility. I'll kind of believe that when I see it. You're losing your big time guy on the outside. Can you have some other guys have a breakout at receiver in this game? Can you see some offensive linemen step up and maybe find some momentum there? Defensively, anybody on the D line, we didn't see Tyshawn Willis this year. Could he step in and have a big game? All of that is beneficial for you when you talk about State getting guys reps. But the biggest piece of that is Kamario Taylor. You've got a quarterback who is the future face of your program that now you get to have 15 practices, a full month. You are the starting quarterback. And we get those reps, and then we're going getting him live reps in a game against a good defense. Again, Wake Forest is good on the defensive side of the ball. And I think it's a defense that'll test them. I haven't watched a lot of Wake. I started watching one of their games playing SMU, which was a big upset win for them against a good SMU team. An SMU team that plays an offense very similar to what Mississippi State likes to do. And Wake Forest, man, attacking, changing the angles with, bringing blitzes from all over the field, showing pressure and then backing out of it, rotating down their safeties last minute, a unit that looks like it's striving to create a lot of confusion on defense. That is a great test for Kamario Taylor. And I don't care if he goes out and he has a terrible game. It's something he gets to see it in a game that, hey, it's valuable reps, but if you lose it, it's kind of okay, it is what it is. And if he goes out and handles it well, it gives you all the more confidence of wow, what's this guy going to do next season? If there was one reason for Mississippi State to accept a bowl game, it is Kamario Taylor. Let him go and get reps. And, man, it's a chance for State to get some positive momentum heading into the offseason. And you felt like you captured a little bit because of signing day going as well as it did. That's another thing. Some of these guys have a chance to now be early enrollees and get to practice for bowl prep. So get some guys on campus and come get them to start learning some reps. Could you start installing Arnett's defense a little bit? I know the talk is he's not going to be the defensive play caller, but he might start to get to be around the guys and figure some things out. There's a ton of value here that you otherwise wouldn't get for a program that needs as much practice and as many reps as it possibly could get. You're being gifted it. So you got to take advantage. But all those reasons, none is bigger than Kamario. But again, you have the chance to grab some momentum because signing day, you got a little bit of momentum. I think the Arnett move, people were mostly excited about it. So that it's okay, well, the bad man is gone with Coleman Huxler. So now Zach Arnett stepping in. We can be excited and happy about that. Can you do something on the field? Can you go out and play a good game, even if the defense looks like crap? If Camario goes out and is stars in a bowl game, even if State doesn't win, that's going to be another like, okay, we got our guy. We feel better about the pieces coming in. We think we got a better defensive coordinator. We can start to have some fun and start to get excited about what the 2026 season might look like. So it's a huge opportunity for State. I hope they go out and put a good effort. I mean, that's January 2nd, so they're going to be waiting a little bit, quite a long time. But, I mean, you get to keep the guys on campus. Like, that's the other good thing, too. You know, I know that's a point others have brought up, that in this portal era, keeping guys around the program, especially when you're struggling, helps. Keep them around the team. Like that, I think all those things matter. So this is a game that I think you want to see State go out and put a good foot forward, but like it's a chance to really get some positive momentum in the offseason and get some excitement around the program. Can it be a launching point? I don't know, but you're being given that opportunity. Like it really feels like it's funny. We went into the Egg Bowl talking about how big of a chance this was for Zach Arnett, for Jeff Lebby to finally see some momentum. And you lose the game in lopsided fashion. Not a good performance whatsoever. And it kind of felt like, okay, yeah, whatever momentum you had is gone. It's like there's this little glimmer of hope thanks to Camario Taylor starting the game. Cool. But like, why do we have any reason to be optimistic? But then you have signing day go the way it does. You have the hire of Arnett. Before all this, let's be honest, Ole Miss getting rid of Kiffin, not getting rid of Kiffin, but Kiffin leaving Ole Miss, and that move and looking like they're weakening, which, by the way, Golding's press conference, he's Arnett. Y'all have fun with that, man. I do need to say this because I said it to a couple of chats. I am no prude at all when it comes to language. People who know me know that's definitely not the case. But I do think college football fans do this very stupid thing where when a coach gets into a press conference and starts cussing like a sailor and basically says things that like you shouldn't be saying in a professional setting, football fans take that and think it means he's a good coach. They're like, oh, look at our guy. He doesn't care about ruffling any feathers or looking for. He's just an old school, hard nosed ball coach. That's the only thing that matters right there. We got a guy who's going to step in, and you see our guy. You see how many times he said. You see how many times he said X, Y, Z, and it literally means nothing. It literally means nothing. But football fans convince themselves that my coach cusses, so clearly he's going to be awesome. State fans did it with Arnett. Like every time Arnett said something it wasn't supposed to, State fans got all giddy about it. Like, oh, he cussed. Means nothing. It's going to be very funny to see that blow up in their face, but whatever. But Ole Miss starting over in a sense, even though they're in the playoff, they're going to win a playoff game because they're going to beat Tulane. Whatever. You see a window opening to regain some momentum. Now you're being gifted a bowl game. And it's like, okay, man, now you get a chance to really go out and do something. So this is something Mississippi State, I think, needs to take full advantage of. I hope they go out and put a good effort forward. And look, I'm looking forward to get to talk about a little bit more football for State. Especially because, my God, basketball is not giving MSU anything to be excited about. I know the women's team is doing well, and hopefully that continues into conference play. But men's basketball, that's rough. It's rough. Which I did get an answer, by the way, for those who have asked, like, are we going to talk about other sports on here? Yeah, we'll talk about other stuff. It doesn't have to just be football. We can talk some basketball. We can talk baseball, but I'm going to be honest with y'all. Even as someone who recognizes the reality for basketball right now and I'm not going to blame people for doing the get me to baseball season thing. For the first time ever, I'm not going to blame people for doing that because normally I'm one when y'all say that, like when's baseball season? I hate it. I won't blame you this year, but I'm not going to talk about it. Like I don't get hyped. Like at least not until like a month before the season. Once that happens, okay, we can start talking about a little bit of baseball. I don't do. We're in the middle of the winter and we're already locked in on baseball. But we should have plenty to talk about with football though, because now we got a bowl game that we can talk about. So that'll hopefully be a lot of fun. So have we'll have other things to discuss. State football gave us stuff to talk about. Hopefully we have more clarity in the coming days on the coaching staff and what that's going to look like moving forward, and things get a little bit finalized. Question from Oliver: does one of the Big Ten lock up the Heisman for Mendoza? Or do you think Pavia? It's Mendoza. I think Pavia, in a lot of ways, like I do think there's a lot of people who just are not blown away by what he's done to begin with. Which I get it, he's been a crazy player, but I feel like there's a narrative around Pavia that like the stats are really not that impressive overall, whereas Mendoza has more typical numbers. But yeah, I think Mendoza's probably got the Heisman locked up. Yeah, I know that's unfortunate for you. Oliver's a Purdue fan, which Barstool Big Cat retweeted the video of a KB from Barstool making the comment that beating Purdue is not an upset. Every time I watch a Purdue basketball game, they're ranked like top 3 in the country and they lose. And that's every time you watch Purdue. And that's exactly what happened with Purdue and Iowa State. Iowa State loss doesn't look as bad for Mississippi State now. Clearly, that's a great resume point for Mississippi State basketball. Going to fight all the way back to not making the NIT. Thanks to that net boost right there. We'll be able to talk about some other stuff. But again, hope to close this out. Hopefully we got more clarity on the coaching staff in the coming days. Yeah, we'll see on that. If anything comes up for the bowl, I'll try to get somebody on who covers Wake Forest. I think that'd be great to get a little bit of perspective of all part of the conversation is not necessary. Hopefully I can get someone who covers Wake Forest. It'd be fun to talk about them a little bit, get a perspective, because I know State fans aren't going to be that familiar with Wake. I'm not that familiar with Wake. Other than that, their quarterback this year is Robbie Ashford, former Auburn Tiger, former South Carolina Gamecock, and he started off at Oregon. That's one of those guys who's been like everywhere. Zach Arnett defense beat Robbie Ashford in 2022. Now, he did run for a lot of yards in that game in the second half. State couldn't stop him, but they did win the game. So maybe take some pointers there from Arnett, try to get it done against him. That's going to do it for me tonight. Appreciate everyone for tuning in and for commenting. It's a lot of fun to have the interaction throughout the show. Got some info in the show. I did not know about that other coaching hire. If you haven't already, please leave us a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell on so you do know when we do go live. As always, swing your sword and Hail State.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click Join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.